All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Today, shortly, we're going to welcome in Sebastian Salazar, talk about the Women's World Cup of Soccer, where the Americans are favourites. And then we'll close out with our best bets at the moment. I'm going to go to baseball. Drew, I believe you're going to go to your favourite Tour de France. But before we get into that, let's talk about the Open Championship, last of the majors for the year. Look at the odds. First of all, Rory McIlroy, kind of the Ons Jabeur of golf these days, though he at least has some majors banked. He's 7-1. Scotty Scheffler, 8-1. John Rahm, 12-1. Reigning champ, my countryman Cam Smith, plus 1,600. Then Brooks Koepka, Victor Hovland, and the resurgent Ricky Fowler around the 20-1 range. What are you looking at in this handicap?
Yeah, this is tough as always. And I mean, total, to be perfectly candid, like I kind of can't believe how poor my ROI has been in golf this year. Like I'm not, and it's not even just a matter of I'm picking in some long shot markets and just nothing's coming home. Like even the high probability stuff, 50-50 shots, I've been bleeding. So I'm not firing from a place of confidence when it comes to picking golf at all. And I look at this top of this board and I see prices like 7-1, 8-1 on Rory and Scotty, and it's like, man, it just looks so short. It's not to say that neither of these guys is going to win or can win. They're two best golfers in the world right now, in form in ways that I haven't seen, the top of the field coming into a major in a while. And, so I think their prices are warranted, but I'm not really interested in either one at those prices. And John Rahm on the outside of the top three makes sense to me, just because since his Masters win, we haven't really seen him sustain, kind of consistent level of performance. Cameron Smith to me was one that I had circled. I had high hopes he was going to kind of be for a little bit overlooked, like in the 20-1, 25-1 range here to repeat, but no, 16-1 is super short. And then when you get into that next class of players, it's kind of a mix of guys who are, they've made noise recently. They've Ricky Fowler finally getting a championship or, a title, in the run up here. Hovland knocking on the door last couple of big time tournaments, and Koepka, of course, having won the PGA Championship and threatening at the Masters. I get why those guys are in there, but I can't make sense of any of those prices. I think realistically, someone's going to come from sort of that next tier of player, say 15-30, 15-40, kind of in that range, and is going to make their impression on this tournament, because it doesn't look like a course that's especially difficult, in my opinion. I think the wind and just in general, when you're out there and, the general severity of the wind is going to matter, and that's a little bit unpredictable, but I think that levels things where, you could get a guy who's playing well, who's in a decent window, goes low on one of these days. It looks to me like a scoreable course. It looks to me like a course that is going to be entertaining to watch for sure. But there's going to be it looks long. It looks like that it's going to play long. And so you can eliminate some of the guys, in Opens past, it was an older tournament. At least the olds had a better shot at scoring, even though they didn't necessarily have the length. I think the length is going to matter here. And just in general, kind of course management, as always in these majors, matters. Only outright I've placed so far is on Tom Kim. I bet him at 60-1. I think he's a fair play down to about 40-1. Give him a little under 5% chance to win this tournament. And I think realistically, the quality we've seen him put together now, 3 of the last 4 tournaments, particularly strokes gained approach, has me interested in him as a player. He was, of course, like the next big thing all throughout the fall and winter, and then largely forgotten about it as he had kind of a pedestrian stretch through the late winter, spring months, and he's heating up. He obviously carrying a lot of confidence into the Scottish Open after what he did in his breakout performance last year. Performed really well there this weekend. I think he carries that into a really competitive Open Championship. So far for me, only bet is on Tom Kim.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. Tom Kim, if we're to continue the tennis, golf, cross-sport analogies, I'd say Tom Kim is like the Holger Rune at the moment.
That's super fair. Yes.
Yeah, and he's 45-1, so nice price there. To your point earlier about golf results, I will say like golf outrights are just hard to beat in general. And certainly the highest proportion, I think, of sharp betting on golf tends to happen on the 72-hole matchup bets. Certainly when I was trading, that's where most of the action came in. I think those are probably the most vulnerable markets. Outrights, obviously, they can be beat. Bad prices are out there. Just generally when a book puts up its odds in the outright, I'm always just looking at just what leaps off immediately as just kind of odd, not necessarily wrong, but odd. I remember when the PGA Championship was at Kiowa, when Phil Mickelson ended up winning as a 200-1 shot. I remember that tournament, just seeing Brooks Koepka's name next to 60-1. It's like, how is Brooks Koepka 60-1 to win the PGA Championship? And I think he ended up finishing second or so. And as I was looking at the Open Championship odds, the one that leapt out to me, and I'm not saying he's going to win or even that it's a bet, but Justin Thomas is 70-1 to win a major, which is just incredible. And obviously he has completely fallen off a cliff. He's missing cuts for fun, but just someone of that talent, where the good thing in a way is that his big struggle lately has been putting, where he's just completely lost with his short game. And that is something where that can change quickly. And he hasn't been great in other parts of his games, but it's really been the putting that has fallen apart. So, I mean, do you think Justin Thomas is just a write-off until further notice, or is 70-1 big enough of a price where it's worth taking a swing?
He's a write-off for me, but I get where you're coming from. 70-1 is a crazy price for a guy that, in a neutral tournament in his prime, you would have thought you're never going to get this guy outside of 20, maybe 30 if he was struggling. Something's obviously going on with him just in general in terms of competitiveness lately. He was at Wimbledon, by the way. I'm not sure if you saw those pictures, but he and his crew there checking out some of the tennis. But no, I think the only like super long, or the one head scratching long shot, and actually you mentioned him that I wanted your opinion on, and I don't even know if I really want this karma. I don't know if he really has the goods to put 4 great rounds together, but Phil Mickelson is 150-1 in some spots. And I look at the layout of this course, and it looks to me to be to favor lefties to a degree. A lot of dog leg lefts. If you don't necessarily have that shot in your bag, it's going to be difficult for you to, particularly thrive on some of the off the tee spots and some of the approaches. And so it looks like a lefty's course to me in the blind. And for what it's worth, he's been playing pretty well at these majors. And again, for whatever reason, the older guard tend to have some tricks up their sleeves when it comes to links golf that make them competitive in these opens that otherwise we don't really see on the rest of the tour. So it's been a trend where you have these live golfers who are not playing as much during the rest of the season, and they are primed and ready for these big tournaments. And I wonder in the back of my head if Lefty doesn't have some sort of say in how things go this weekend, at least especially at that giant price. Is it silly to taint the accounts with that bad karma, or is 150-1 worth a shot?
I was talking to people about whether Deshaun Watson is a bet for MVP. So whatever the price is, if it's wrong, it has to be bet. Deshaun Watson's not going to win MVP. But yeah, with Mickelson, who just has a tendency to get closer, disproportionately close in these majors than it feels like he should, between the PGA and then the Masters. I'll just close out on this by saying that if I was going to make one bet on the outright board, and you and I spoke about it before, but Russell Henley 125-1, where this is a course that seems to, I think, to prize driving accuracy, and he's the best on tour in that department. He's been in really solid form lately, 8 top 20s in his past 10 starts. He also finished 4th at the Masters, 14th at the US Open, so he's coming into this with some decent form at majors. Won't mention the miscut at the PGA Championship in between those, but at least he does have some scope and upside. So at 125-1, that would be my play there. All right, before we talk about the World Cup, a reminder, with the NFL season quickly approaching, now is the perfect time to get your Roto World Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Get ready for your draft and stay one step ahead of your league during the preseason with updated player rankings, profiles, projections, mock drafts, and more. Go to NBCSports.com/draft guide and use code DRAFT2023 to save 20% at checkout. All right, let's welcome in Sebastian Salazar from ESPN. Sebastian, looking great. Thank you very much for joining us, mate. The US women's national team is in pretty good shape in terms of the odds. Clear favourite to win the World Cup. What's their form like heading in?
Interesting, because from this side of the ocean, there's a lot of things to pick at on this team. If you actually go back really to the last major international tournament, the Tokyo Olympics, they won only 2 of the 6 games they played there. That's a terrible tournament by U.S. standards. They won the bronze medal, but they really didn't have success, and they didn't look like a good team. So you came out of that tournament with a lot of questions. I think the big question was, could the manager make this team younger and faster? He's definitely done that, Vlatko Ananovsky. I don't know if he's made them better. In the year and a half since, they've failed to impress. They've really failed to be that team that is clinical in the final third. And, of course, there was a stretch last fall where they lost 3 straight games against England, Germany, and Spain. That hadn't happened in 25 years. So I think there's some real concerns around this U.S. team heading in, not just based on what the rest of the world is, and I think it's pretty clear that they've caught up, but also based on the form of really the last 2 years since the Tokyo Olympics.
Ooh, interesting. Making me nervous. I got a pretty good price on the U.S. Women World Team to lift the cup, so hopefully they find it in this
defending
tournament.
champs.
Yeah,
it's not a bad value, depending on what you're getting it at.
Is there a little bit of a balance here? Like, I mean, and you have experience, but maybe you need to bring in the youth in this particular tournament, and it's a little bit of a threading the needle to kind of, to our listeners who especially care about the NBA. We saw the Golden State Warriors try and fail to pull this off this last season of bringing on the young generation while still kind of keeping the experience out on the court to chase the championship. But they have a difficult group. The U.S. women, that is. Group B is at least on paper the most difficult of the groups at the Women's World Cup. You mentioned it. Some of the European teams, particularly France and Germany, at least look to have taken huge steps forward in this tournament. Although for my money, at least, England has taken a meaningful step backwards. And I think the location being in in Jay's home country of Australia, as well as some of these matches taking place in New Zealand, a little bit of a neutral location here where it doesn't necessarily favor the European teams or the North American teams. What are some of the kind of key handicapping thoughts that are going through your head about the U.S. women, number one, getting out of this group, and then from there carrying through to a run to another title? Yeah,
I mean, to your point about it being kind of a difficult group, I think Netherlands is a team that on paper could be a threat, but without Vivian Miedema, who's really kind of their star attacking force, they really take a major step back for me as far as being kind of title contenders. They did take the U.S. women to penalty kicks in the quarterfinal of the last Olympics. The U.S. advanced, but this is not the same team. So I think they're not really a threat. Still potentially, you could see them drawing a match against the U.S. minus 400. It's really a big swing for the fences there. But I think the U.S. will get out of this group as the number one team, and that'll set them up nicely for a run deep in the tournament. I do think there are other teams that for me give you a lot more value than the U.S. women. It depends what you're getting them at, like plus 200, something like that. I see a lot of value in the home team. Australia potentially making a run. They're going off at maybe like 12-1. Yeah. Sam Kerr's the best player in the world. She's the most likely player in the world to score over 90 minutes, and I think that's a huge differentiator, and especially when you get to knockout rounds of games. And then I think one of the European teams will jump up. There's a lot of boom or bust among the European teams. I think France, interesting story. They could be boom or bust. Corinne Diacre was their longtime head coach. The players all hated her. They finally got rid of her earlier this year. They brought in Hervé Renard, who's the manager who led Saudi Arabia to the shock upset of Lionel Messi's Argentina at the World Cup. And they've looked good. But, man, they've had some really bad injuries. They just had another one in the last week or so in defense. So I'm just really curious about a lot of these European teams outside of England. I do think England is the best team that comes out of Europe. Obviously, I can look back at the European Championships last year, and I think, for the injuries they've suffered, they've also added some pieces. Look at a player like Lauren James, who's just a potentially super dynamic piece in international football.
Okay, so one of the reasons I bet the U.S. women at the price I did was because of the way that the draw kind of put the other 4 realistic contenders in a place where if they win their groups, they're going to end up on the bottom half of the knockout draw, which is always intriguing. Like that's if you're playing a future, in my opinion, you got to be trying to capitalize on a lopsided draw, a lopsided bracket, and that's what it looks like we may end up with. Australia, if they win Group B, will be on the bottom. England, if they win Group D, will be on the bottom. France, F bottom. Germany, H bottom. Is there anyone in A, C, E, or G that you think realistically could stop the U.S. from getting to the final?
So Sweden is an obvious team that just stands out. They have a long history against the U.S., and it's a team that has kind of held on to a golden generation perhaps a little bit too long. They might be a little bit long in the tooth to really push the U.S., but there's so much history there that if they meet, it's the type of game that would be a one-goal game. It would go to penalties, and Sweden is just a tough out there. In Group C, I think, is the other big boomer bust out of Europe, and that's Spain. So Spain has probably the most talented players in the world. If you look at what the club teams that play in Spain, specifically Barcelona, have achieved in the last 2 years, it is the best football in the women's game. And a lot of the best players in the Spanish league, they make up this Spanish team. There was a huge mutiny. 15 players said they would refuse to play for Jorge Vilda. And unlike what they did in France, where they fired the manager, in Spain, they kept the manager. The federation stuck with the manager, and they've pretty much made peace with all of the big players. So Spain is this team where if those dynamics can work out, they could be a real threat. And they have played the U.S. even with a lot of those key players missing and given them problems. In fact, it was last fall in that 3-game losing streak for the U.S., one of those losses was against Spain, and a lot of the stars were sitting out at that time. A lot of those players will be back, so that could be a really interesting matchup in the knockout rounds.
Yep, and Spain are plus 550 and the third favorite to win the World Cup behind the US and England. Sebastian, you mentioned Sam Kerr. Fun fact for if anyone, well, I don't think many people know listening to this, but her brother, Daniel Kerr, was a top 5 player in Australian football. So pretty incredible sporting family, the Kerrs. They do it very well. Also, the US, their first match against Vietnam later in the week. The US are minus 25,000 favorites on the money line, which means that they are approximately, by my numbers, 100% chance to win that match. Vietnam are 350 to 1 to win Group E. So unfortunately, not sure that is going to be a close one. Last one for you, Sebastian. In terms of expectations for the US, look at their odds in terms of how far they are likely to go. They're minus 175 to reach the semifinal, so certainly anything short of that would be a huge disappointment. They are plus 125 to reach the final, which means that, at least by expectations, with odds makers, that they are less than a 50% chance to make the final, and that reaching the final would be exceeding expectations. Do you think that's the sense that if they were to lose the final, is that seen as not good enough, but basically par, or is this really just title or bust?
I literally asked the same question. Is it title or bust to all of the players? Because we got a chance to speak to 10 of the key players before they left in California for their media day. And every answer was, we have to win. You know, when you talk about the pedigree of the program and kind of keeping up with the history, there are some players like Megan Rapinoe, Alex Morgan, they have their titles. There are a lot of players on this team, 14 players for whom it is the first World Cup, who don't have that and know that it's up to them to keep that standard. So there's a lot of pressure and a lot of belief, at least internally, that this team will make the final and ultimately bring home the title. I think the reality is much different. I do think it's a coin flip whether they'll make it to the final. I think despite the fact that the bracket does set up nicely, when you ask this team to beat 3 straight good teams, that's what they're going to have to do. I just think that recent history doesn't suggest that that's more than a 50-50 shot right now. If we look at their kind of competition against the best teams in the world over the last year and a half, 2 years.
Is there anything that you are looking for specifically in the group round robin that will change your opinion on this?
You know, yes. So one of the big questions is who's going to score the goals, right? We know Alex Morgan is the big name. I don't think she's going to be the primary goal scorer. Sophia Smith is a player who, when she has played at the domestic level in the NWSL, has dominated, can score and can create for others. There was going to be another player, Mallory Pugh, now Mallory Swanson on the other side. She suffered a devastating injury, and so she's out. And whoever fills that role, if they have a breakout World Cup, and I think we could see that in the first 3 games here, then I think I might change my attitude. And I think that the players most likely to be that are Trinity Rodman, who's just an incredibly dynamic player and scored 2 goals in the U.S. farewell match against Wales, which other than those 2 goals was a disappointment. It took the U.S. 78 minutes to break through against Wales. And then Alyssa Thompson, who's 18 years old and is physically the most dynamic player on the team. She is a lightning bolt. And if she can put some finished product on that lightning bolt and through the first 3 games, build some confidence, then I think I could see this team doing some damage. My big questions about the U.S. are in the final third. Those are my big questions. Will they be dangerous enough? Will they be clinical enough that when they get to the knockout rounds, they'll be able to beat the best teams?
Yep. No, that's fair enough. And that obviously kicks off later this week, as everyone will get to understand my pain in trying to follow my Collingwood Magpies from the Australian time zone, which is pretty brutal, but at least the US games are a bit more kindly scheduled, 9 p.m. Eastern Friday night against Vietnam, the first one. So that is doable. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell people where to follow you on social media and what you'll be working on during the World Cup?
Absolutely. I'm actually down in Miami now. We're on Messi Watch down here as the GOAT was introduced last night. Follow me at Sebi Salazar FUT as in football on Twitter and Instagram. And check us out on ESPN Plus, Football Americas Mondays and Thursdays, 8:30 Eastern time. We're talking all the best soccer in North America.
Awesome. Thanks very much for your time, Sebastian. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks.
Cheers. All right, before we close out with some final thoughts and some last bets, a reminder, MLB leadoff on Sunday, Juan Soto and the Padres, the reeling Padres after losing 3 massive games to the Phillies after a good start to the series. A bit worried about my Blake Snell Cy Young bet. If they keep losing, you might get traded. But the Padres, they're looking to climb back into the postseason picture, and they'll have a shot to inch closer on Sunday with MLB leadoff in Detroit when they face the Tigers. Really need to win this game, Padres. Stream it all live on July 23rd at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock, where Ahmed Fareed, my good friend, almost got his head taken off by a foul ball by Michael Conforto on leadoff on Sunday. Jeez. Incredible scenes on live television, but Ahmed survived. Drew, final thoughts now that we're in a, quieter period. I think there's always things to bet on. There's always sports going on, but certainly with MLB leading up to the trade deadline, Wimbledon has passed. Obviously, no NBA, NFL still a while away. NHL done too. College still coming. A bit of a quieter period for most, but what are you betting on now?
Yeah, the 5th major, 5th slam in tennis started today. Newport, Rhode Island, of course, the Hall of Fame of tennis, last grass tournament of the season. I'm tongue in cheek making a joke about that. It's a fun tournament. It's really cool seeing. I would love to go see it one day, but I'm not betting it this week. I'm taking a week off after just a really incredible Wimbledon. That men's final was all time. It sets the stage for probably the most anticipated hard court swing through the U.S. leading up to the U.S. Open of my lifetime. There is going to be so much interest and intrigue and just eyes on the sport of tennis, men's tennis in particular, with the this sliding doors moment of Alcaraz potentially taking the crown from Djokovic, and the setup, the run up to what will likely be the rubber match for them, as they will almost certainly have will decide the U.S. Open outside of some challenger emerging here. But it's all about kind of, shaping the numbers, thinking hard about the hard court swing, changing over from grass to hard court tennis modeling, and preparing for that run up here. And at the same time, is kind of doing my homework on NFL, and of course, bringing home a Tour de France yellow jersey. Jay, Jonas Vingegaard continues to hang on by the narrowest of margins over Tadej Pogačar. It is effectively a stalemate at this point, and tomorrow's stage is likely to decide it. Tomorrow's stage is an individual time trial. It is a very challenging course with some serious hills. So this is not like the time trials that are on flat ground where it's just literally how many watts can you produce, ready to go. This is going to take a little bit of strategy. You have absolutely no team to pull you. You have to do all of the hard work yourself on an individual time trial. And the gap of 10 seconds is either going to be not enough to keep Jonas in yellow, or it's going to be, or he's got a surprise left, because the last two stages were mountain stages where you would have thought if Jumbo-Visma they thought they needed to attack and do damage to him, they would have, but they elected to basically just sort of ride it out and kind of give a few seconds back here or there, as opposed to really putting together a concerted effort to do damage to Pogačar, and that to me means that they have some level of confidence that Jonas is going to put together a pretty impressive individual time trial, maybe even win this stage. He has yet to win a stage. It's unusual to be the general classification winner without a stage win. I think in general we've seen some pretty impressive time trials by him over the last several years. So this could be his breakout moment. But tomorrow's time trial, in my opinion, decides this one way or the other. And Jumbo-Visma is telegraphing, I think, that they expect their rider to be the best.
Okay. Big moment for Jumbo-Visma. I love it. Let's go. Finger go. Finger go we're going with. Very good. Going back to Alcaraz for a second against Djokovic. The first set, Alcaraz's body just wasn't just clear. It was the same thing that happened in Paris, where just the limbs weren't really working for a stretch there, where it just was like he's trying to end every point too early, a bit too nervous. And then he won the first game. He just held serve in the second set. I messaged a friend that I think Alcaraz is going to win this because he'd gotten the first game at the end of the first set, and then it just seemed like he'd settled down. And why I'm saying this is not to point out any of my own genius, because I didn't even bet it live at that point.
It was a big number.
More to just outline that every match that he plays from now on against anyone is on his racket. Yeah. He's the best tennis player I've ever seen. I think that if you were to make a tennis player in a lab, you would make Carlos Alcaraz. And what makes him so special is the fact that he came to the fore on clay. He's this elite clay court baseliner, but then he's also amazing at the net and with drop shots and with lobs and with trick shots, and he covers the ground like no one I've ever seen. And he's also got a massive serve. He's just a perfect tennis player. And I think that with health and with no freak outliers to his career, he's just going to go down as the greatest tennis player of all time. And I think that match against Djokovic, because obviously he's already won the US Open, but to beat Djokovic at Wimbledon, to ruin the calendar slam, to do all of that, especially what happened at Roland Garros, he is here, and just appreciate it, because Djokovic is probably the greatest to this point, and he is magnificent. He's not as fun as Alcaraz. His game. I don't even really like Novak Djokovic, to be honest. Alcaraz is just 100% approval rating for his game, for everything there. So it was special to watch, and I mean, he's only going to keep going up, and Djokovic can't really get up. So it's going to be enjoyable. And do you think he's a bet for the US Open at current prices?
I haven't decided yet. This is a cop-out. I had kind of anticipated that these guys were going to play so much tennis and just be exhausted by the time the U.S. Open got there that it might be somebody like a Rune who comes out of nowhere and wins the U.S. Open. Right now, that feels like dead money. Because I have some Rune tickets that I just don't do. I'm not really counting on that coming through here. I'm gonna write those off at some point. But Djokovic at least has I don't think you can make super grand statements about him now being the clear advantage in a head-to-head between these two players. Because he had some advantages, I thought, on grass where his game was just more of an unknown for Djokovic, right? Like Djokovic, you could see, as you kind of noted, like the match was on his racket the whole time. And as soon as he settled down and figured it out, it was like, oh, okay, this is happening. This is on. And I mean, Djokovic was also very tight in that tiebreak. Djokovic had a couple of really bad unforced errors. He could have been up 2-0 and he could have won 3-0. Like that wouldn't have been crazy, right? And it was a very narrow margin at the end of that second set that really turned the tide in terms of ultimately like opening the door for him to win. But yeah, every point was on his, his 18 winners in the fifth set compared to 3 for Djokovic. Djokovic couldn't find a winner to save his life because Alcaraz was playing the best defense of his career. So there was a little bit of an unknown. That was the best Alcaraz can possibly play. And for what it's worth, Djokovic has fewer miles logged this season just because he hasn't played as much. Usually he is a bet against at the US Open because he's out of gas by that time in the calendar, but it's not necessarily the case this year. Because he skipped so many intermediate tournaments. He skipped Miami, he skipped Indian Wells. He didn't play in I don't think he played Madrid. He barely played in Rome. So he just doesn't have nearly as much time on court logged, which makes him very dangerous at the US Open, in my opinion. Conditions are going to matter. Path is going to matter, but ultimately I think whoever gets to the final with less kind of bleeding less blood, because it's going to be tough. There's some really good players in this in the game still. Ultimately whoever gets there with less damage done, I think, is probably your favorite in that final. And I'm not prepared to say for sure it will be Alcaraz at this point, but I know that based on the result of this Wimbledon final, he's going to be like minus 200. Defending champion. Alcaraz, Djokovic is consistently struggling at Flushing Meadows throughout his career. He's probably the bet on in the US Open final if you're getting him at a dog price.
Yep, I think that's reasonable. It's kind of obviously Alcaraz is amazing and a joy to watch. It's kind of depressing that he's going to, from an odds perspective and a betting perspective, that he's just going to dominate now for the next 15 years because the women's side is so much more fun to bet on. Also, women's tennis is also much better to watch than men's tennis, in my opinion. Just a better game because the serving is as dominant, there's more suspense, shorter format. So to me, it's just a better sport to watch, at least the better gendered sport to watch. And I think that there's a lot more betting opportunity as well, at least in the outright market. You're always going to have your quarter markets and stuff on the men's side. But I got to say, outside of cheering home Yannick Sinner quarter 3 or whatever quarter he was in, wasn't a lot of suspense from an odds perspective on the men's side of the draw. Whereas Marketa Vondrousova, we're going to talk about that final, but getting up from 100 to 1 pre-tournament. All right.
Three quick thoughts before we wrap here. Number one, you would have said that about Roger Federer in 2004. Before he went on and was just absolutely amazing to watch at every tournament, and it was still incredible to watch him thrive. You would have not known that there was going to be a Nadal and Djokovic who were going to come on Federer's heel, Alcaraz in general, bringing his level is going to elevate the entire next generation of young players because he's going to demand so much more of them if they want to ultimately get it done. And the gap isn't so great that I don't think the Runes of the world or the other young players can't ultimately win stuff. By the way, Alcaraz, Nadal, French Open 2024. Can I interest anyone in that? that'll be another opportunity to take a crown from a king. So there is a lot of drama potentially coming in the next calendar year for the sport of tennis. I'm very excited.
Yes, and I think that Yannick Sinner is going to rue that match point lost in the quarterfinal of the US Open against Alcaraz because he had no right to be in that position and he didn't close it out, and he probably would have won the tournament if he just wins that one match point on his own serve. But alas, we cannot talk anymore about Yannick Sinner. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks everyone watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe to us if you're listening in podcast form, and also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.